Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. My name is Burhanuddin and in this lecture we are going to learn about the TabHost layout in Android. Okay, so let's just open the Android Studio and create a new project. Click on Start New Project, select the empty activity and click on the Next button. Now I will name this application as TabHost app and now click on Finish. And let's just wait until the Gradles are built successfully. Okay, so now my project is ready. So actually there are two ways of setting up the TabHost layout. So now we will take a look at the first way and then we will take a look at the second way. Okay, in the first way we are going to use activity group instead of this app compact activity class, and in the second way we are going to use this app compact activity class. Okay, so let's just go to underline and activity underline main .xml layout. Let's just switch to the split view and remove the constraint layout and change it to linear layout. Okay, there is no fixed thing that you should only use the linear layout. You can use any of the layout, but as of my preference I am using the linear layout. Okay, so let's just remove this text view and now let's just switch back to the design view, and now from this palette section let's just drag and drop the TabHost into this our design. Okay, so it will be in the legacy section. Okay, so just go to that and then click on this TabHost and drag and drop it to this linear layout, and now as you can see there is a TabHost layout in our design view. Okay, so now let's just switch back to split view, and now as you can see I'll just switch it to the code view to get the better understanding of the code. Okay, now as you can see inside our linear layout there is a TabHost attribute which contains layout width and layout height, both of match parent. Okay, and then there is a linear layout which contains our TabHost, and as you can see the orientation of the linear layout is set to vertical. Okay, then it contains a tab widget attribute. Okay, and then there is frame layout which contains linears, actually three of them, which will act as a tabs, okay, or the screen. So but for now for the first method I don't want this linear, so I will just remove this linear from the frame layout. Okay, remove this attribute too. Okay, so now as you can see there is only single tab in our design view. Okay, so now let's just open the activity main.java file, and now let's just initialize our logic here, but first we need to change this app compact activity to another class, that is the main activity will extend another class which is known as activity group. So let's just do it. First, as you can see the activity group came from android.app. Okay, so let's just click on it, and now we can implement our logic here. So inside this onCreate method let's just first set up our TabHost. So for that I will I'm going to directly instantiate my TabHost object here. So for that I will type TabHost and then I'll say TabHost. In order to create the TabHost object, let's just import the classes for it. Now let's just first open this imports. As you can see currently we have only two classes imported. Okay, two libraries actually imported, and now I'll import the library for TabHost layout. Just click on Alt Enter And now as you can see that the library for TabHost layout that came from android.widget.tabhost is now automatically imported. Okay, so now let's just instantiate this TabHost layout. So for that I will say I will cast this object actually into a TabHost type, and now I'll say find view by id r.id dot the id of my TabHost layout, that will be TabHost. Let's just check it. Open the activity underline main, and now as you can see that there is no id assigned to my TabHost layout, so I will assign it one. I will say TabHost. Okay, so now let's just move back to the Java file, and now as you can see the error is gone. Now let's just put the semicolon at the end, and now after instantiating the object of the TabHost layout, we need to set up the TabHost. So for that I will use the TabHost object, and I will say TabHost dot setup. Okay, I will use this setup method in order to set up the TabHost layout. But now I need to pass an argument here, so I will say TabHost dot setup and then get local activity manager, this method. Okay, so this method will help us to set up the TabHost for us. Okay, now after setting up the TabHost, we need to add tabs to our TabHost layout. Okay, so for doing that, as you remember, we have removed those linear layouts, so currently there are no tabs associated with our TabHost layout. Okay, so first we need to assign some tabs or add some tabs inside our TabHost layout, and for that I will say we need the object of a tab spec. Okay, so I will say a TabHost dot tab spec, and now I can create the object of a tab spec. I will say spec equals to TabHost. I will use this object of the TabHost, then new TabHost dot new tab spec. Okay, I'll use this method, and this method needs a parameter of tag. Okay, so we will pass a tag which will be a unique value for every tab that we want to include in our TabHost layout. Okay, so for the instance, let's just assign the tag value for the first tab to be 1. Okay, now after the tag, we need to now specify an indicator for our tab, that what will be the label of the tab. So for doing that, we have a method called set indicator. So we will type spec dot, then we will use the this method set indicator, and as you can see there are 3 methods for setting the indicator. The first one we have with the char sequence as a label, and then second one we have which takes the parameter of type view, and the third one we have that actually takes the 2 argument. The first one will be the label and the second one will be the viewable icon. Okay, so the third method we are going to use later on in this lecture, but first let's just use the first method which takes the char sequence as the argument. Okay, so let's just select it, and now we need to pass a string value here. Okay, so we can save the first step as step 1. Okay, so now let's just put the semicolon at the end. Okay, now after setting up the after setting the indicator for the first step, we need to add some value to that tab. Okay, for example, in this area right here, we need to put some value here. Okay, because we don't have any linear layout on any tab content. Okay, so first we need to we have a tab label now with the help of this set indicator method, but now we need to set some content using the set content method of the TabHost layout. Okay, so I will say first let me create an object of an intent, because I want to put some activity or a specific activity for the specific tab. Okay, so for switching to the different activities, I need you to use the intent. Okay, so let me create an intent object and set the activity for that specific tab. Okay, so let's just type intent, then name the object of the intent as intent, and now I create a new object of intent, so I'll say new intent, and now I specify the activities from which I want to switch to the another activity. that is my source activity and the destination activity. Okay, so I will say the first activity will be of main activity as my source activity, and now from this activity I want to move to my destination activity, which will call as first activity. Okay, okay, dot class. Now you might see an error in the first activity, and that is because we have not yet created that first activity. So whenever we will create this first activity, this error will be gone. Okay, so don't worry about that right now. And now let's just set the content of this tab to the content to the first activity. And to doing that, for doing that, we can say spec dot set content method. We can use this one, and as you can see, there are three types of spec method set. There are three types of set content method. Okay, the first one will take the integer, a parameter of integer type. Okay, the second one will take the parameter of intent type, which we are going to use, and the third one will take the parameter of type content factory type. Okay, so let's just use the second method and pass the intent object inside it and put the semicolon at the end. Okay, now we just simply need to add this tab inside our TabHost layout. So for that I will use the TabHost object that we have created earlier, and then I'll say tabhost.addTab, and then we simply pass the object of this tab spec. Okay, so I said tabhost.addTab add tab and then spec. Okay, so this tab add tab method will simply add this spec contents inside this TabHost layout. Okay, so now let's just create the first activity first and then run our application. Okay, so let me just give it this a comment. Always remember, there is a good practice to give the comments about the code in order to later remember that what you have created. Okay, so I will name this I will just type this is first step. Okay, so now let's just create a new activity. So just click on this package folder and then right click on it and new, and then activity, empty activity. Now we will name this activity as first activity. Now click on this generate layout file, and we don't want this activity as a launcher activity, so keep this checkbox unchecked and then just click on finish. Okay, so now as you can see, my activity is now created. So now let's just move on to the activity underline first .xml file, and now let's just drag and drop a text view here. As you can see, here is my text view. Now let's just add some constraint to it, and now let's just change the text to this is first activity. Okay, just press the enter key on your keyboard. Okay, so now let's just run our application and see how does it looks. Okay, so let's just select the device and click on the run button. Now let's just wait until the app is getting installed in my Android emulator. Okay, so as you can see, now my application is up and running. We are already on the tab 1 because Android Studio will automatically select this as the default tab, and now here is my activity first. Okay, but we are unable to see our text view. Okay, and we do not also want this action bar right here, so we'll remove this also. Okay, so let's fix the errors. Okay, so let's just switch back to the design view code section. Now let's just see what is the problem here. So first let's just try to change the theme of our Android Studio. So for that I'll modify the theme here. Okay, so let's just go to the manifest file, and now I'll say first activity, and then I'll assign the theme value here, Android theme, to be with no action bar. So I will select this app compact dot light dot not no action bar theme. Now let's just install our application and to see the changes. Now as you can see, we can see our text view, and the action bar is actually gone. And now as you can see, this is my tab 1 layout. Okay, so let's just create some other tabs as well. So let's just switch back to the main activity, and now let's just create the second tab. Okay, so let's just do the same thing. We do not need to create the step spec object again, so I can use the previous object. So I'll simply type spec spec equals to TabHost dot new tab spec, and then I will give this a tag of 2. Okay, in order to identify it as a second tab. Then I will say spec dot set indicator to tab 2, just put the semicolon at the end, and then I will say intent 1 equals to new intent, and then I'll say main activity dot this to second activity dot class, and then semicolon at the end. Okay, now I just need to pass this intent to the set content method. I'll say spec dot set content, and then I'll simply pass this intent object. I'll say intent 1 and semicolon at the end, and simply I just need to add this tab to the TabHost layout. Okay, so I'll say TabHost dot add tab and pass the tab spec object. Okay, so now let's just create one more tab first. So I'll say this is tab 3. Okay, so now simply use that spec object again. So I say spec equals to TabHost dot new tab spec, then I'll give this a tag value of tab or simply 3, and then put the semicolon at the end. Now I'll say spec dot set indicator in order to set the indicator for the tab, and I will name it as tab 3, then put the semicolon at the end. And now let's just create the intent object for it as well. So I'll say intent 2 equals to new intent, and then I'll say intent main activity dot this, and then third activity dot class. Okay, so let's just put the semicolon at the end, and now let's just pass this intent object to set content method intent 2. Okay, put the semicolon at the end, and now I simply want to add this tab to my TabHost layout. So I'll say TabHost dot add tab, and then simply pass the tab spec object. Okay, so now the 3 tabs are being added to my TabHost layout. Now let's just set the activity for them. Okay, so I'll say new, then activity, then I'll say second activity, okay. Now let's just click on finish. Okay, now let's just create the third activity. I'll say third activity. Okay, now let's just click on finish, and as you can see there is an error. So we have so we have already encountered this error in the previous lectures. So all we need to do is just invalidate cache and restart the Android Studio, as this is the Android Studio bug. So I will go to the file, and then I will say I'll click on this invalidate caches and restart. And now let's just wait until the Android Studio is getting restarted. Okay, so let's just wait until the indexing is done. So now as you can see, my project is ready and the error we were getting is now gone. Okay, so now let's open the activity underline second.xml layout file, and let's just set up the layout for the second tab or second activity. So let's just put the text view here as we have done with the previous activity. So let's just add the constraint here. Okay, now let's just change the text to the this is second activity. Okay, and now let's just switch back to the third dot underline activity third under dot xml layout file, and let's just drop another text view here. Let's just specify the constraints and give this text view the text value. This is third activity. Okay, so now let's just go to the android manifest.xml file, and let's just set the theme for this activities to be of no action bar. Okay, we don't want we don't want the duplicate tree of action bar inside my layout. So I do not want the action bar inside my activities, because I already have about my TabHost layout. Okay, so for that I will say theme and then style to set the style to no action bar, and I will say the same thing for the second activity. I will say theme and then set the style to no action bar. Okay, so now let's just run our application to see whether it is working or not. Let's just wait until the application is getting installed. And as you can see, the application is now running inside my emulator, and now I can actually switch between these three tabs. So let's just click on the second tab, that is tab 2, and now as you can see, it says this is activity second. Now let's just click on the third tab, which says tab 3, and now as you can see, it is saying me that this is third activity. Okay, so now we can actually add different activities like this inside our TabHost layout. Okay, we can provide different types of functionalities inside our activity, and then we can just directly switch add that activity inside our TabHost layout. Okay, this thing is helpful when we have already created some activities which we now want to add the activities in using the TabHost layout. Okay, so we can directly add these activities inside our TabHost layout, and we do not need to again create the layout file for the TabHost, set up the layout file for the activity TabHost activity, and then implement the logic inside it. Okay, so this method might be helpful. Now let's just take a look at the second way of creating the TabHost layout. So for that, let's just create a new activity. Click on the package folder, then right click on the package folder, then go to new, and now then activity, then just select the empty activity, and now we will name this activity as another type host. Okay, now let's just generate a layout file, and then click on finish button. Okay, so now let's just drag and drop the activity TabHost layout, but first let's just change this constraint layout to linear layout. And now let's just switch to the design view and let's just add the TabHost to our linear layout. Okay, so now let's just switch back to the code view, and now we do not want to delete this linear layout. Now in the first one, when we are creating our tabs inside the main activity.java file, we'll just close all other tabs, and now let's just open the activity main.java. Okay, now as you can see, we were creating the tabs here manually, okay, by using this method. But now we do not need to create these tabs manually, because we already have tabs in the form of the linear layout. So I can actually add components inside this linear layout in order to add that component inside my tab, okay, right here. Okay, so now let's just change let's just first add the ID to this TabHost layout. So I'll say ID to be ID TabHost. Okay, so now let's just do one thing, that to identify this or to differentiate these three different tabs or the three different layouts, let's just change the background of these three different tabs. Okay, so for that I will simply type background. I'll simply add the background attribute here. So I will say background, and the first one I will set it to the color prime accent, and now I will add the background attribute to the third tab, second tab, and I will set it to the primary color primary, and then I will say the background attribute for the third tab, and I will set to primary dark. Okay, so now let's just you can see the color here in the small icon here. So now let's just switch back to the main activity. Sorry, we need to open the another TabHost activity, and now we need to add our logic here. So now instead of extending it from the activity group, we will continue this class to be extended to app compact activity. Okay, so now let's just first set up our TabHost here. So I'll say TabHost, then create the object of TabHost, and now I'll cast it to TabHost, and then find view by id r.id.tabHost. So now we actually have two TabHost layout with the name of TabHost, as the id is same for both of them. So now let's just change the id of the second TabHost layout to TabHost 2. Okay, so now let's just change it to TabHost 2. Okay, okay, so we do not need to actually cast that TabHost object to TabHost type. Android will automatically do that. Okay, so now let's just set up now to set up the TabHost. I will use the setup method as usual. So I will say TabHost setup. Okay, now I actually don't need to pass the get local activity manager method here. Okay, because we are already using the app compact activity, and now we do not need to pass here that method here. Okay, now in order to create the first step, we will simply do, let's just first give this a command as this is tab 1. Okay, so now let's just set up our first step. I'll say TabHost, as we need a TabHost of tab spec object. I'll say TabHost.tabspec, and then I'll create the object for tabspec. Now I will say TabHost. I'll use the TabHost object that we have created earlier, and then I will say TabHost.new tabspec. Okay, so now I will specify the tag here. So I'll simply say for the tag, let's just say it as 1, for the first tab, okay, and then at semicolon at the end. Now setting the now let's just set the indicator first. So I'll say test spec dot set indicator, and then I'll set the indicator for this tab as tab 1, okay. So now let's just put the semicolon at the end as well. Now it's time to set the content for this tab, okay. So let's just first type dot now, okay. So now first let's just take out the main activity.java. Now as you can see, while setting the content, we have passed the intent object here, okay, as a content, okay. So we are actually setting the class as the content of this tab 1, okay. But for this tab, this type of tab, I do not want to set an intent or a class to a specific tab. I just want to, I have already defined the content inside my linear layout, okay, which are the content of the TabHost layout, okay. So I just need to pass I just need to specify that layout to this TabHost object, tab spec object actually, that will be used as the content. So I simply need to set spec dot set content, and now as you can see there is and now we will say set content, and now we are going to pass the ID of the linear layout that we want to set as this as the content of this tab host for a particular tab 1, okay. So I'll say r.id, and now I'll say dot the ID of my first tab, that is tab 1, okay. I select it, and now as you can see we are for setting the ID, we are going to actually use the tab set content method, which takes the parameter of integer type, okay. So now let's just add this tab to our TabHost layout, and for that simply say TabHost dot add tab, and then I'll simply pass the spec object here. So I'll say spec, okay. So now this tab is added to my TabHost layout. Now let's just run our application and see whether it is working or not. Now my application is running, but as you can see we are unable to see the second method here, okay. Actually this application is running on the first method. So why is it so? The reason for that is we have not specified this another type host.java class as my main or as my launcher activity, okay. So by default the launcher activity is the main activity.java. So now we need to specify that another type host.java activity is my launcher activity, and to doing that we need to open the manifest file and specify the launcher activity there, okay. So let's just open android.manifest file, and now we need to, as you can see, that the intent filters were provided inside the main activity to specify it as a launcher activity. So first we need to remove these intent filters, and then we need to specify this intent filters inside my another type host activity. So I will say intent filter first in order to open the intent filter tag, and then I need to specify two attributes here. The first one is action, and then I will give the name of main, which will be of main type. So I'll say now instead of putting them inside my main activity, what will I do? I'll just simply put them inside my Android type host activity. So I'll just space them here, and now I need to configure my app, okay. So let's just go to edit configurations, and now instead of launching default activity, what we can do, we can actually keep that to the default activity, but now let's just be more specific. So let's just switch to specified activity, and then we can select our activity that we want as my launcher activity here, and now click on apply, and then okay. So now let's just reinstall our app and to see whether it is working or not. Now as you can see my activity is working, and then and now you can see here is my layout, okay. So let's just switch back to the Java file. Okay, okay. So now let's just add another tab to my to my project. So I'll say this is tab 2. Now I'll use the same code as above, so I will say spec dot uh, tab host tab spec equals to tab host dot add new tab spec, and then I will give this a tag of 2. Okay, so now I'll set the indicator for this spec. I'll say spec dot set indicator, and then I will say tab 2. Okay, and then I will say spec dot set content. I will set the content of tab 2 for this. I'll say r.id.tab2. Okay, and then I'll use TabHost dot add tab method in order to add this layout inside my TabHost. Okay, so that's it for the second tab. Now let's just do it for the third tab also. I'll specify this is tab 3. Okay, then spec equals to TabHost dot add spec. Add tab spec TabHost dot new tab spec, and then I'll give this the tag 3, and then I'll say spec dot set indicator, then I'll set it to tab 3, put the semicolon, then I'll say spec dot set content, and I'll set the tab 3 is my content of this tab spec. Okay, this one, and then I'll add this tab. So I'll say tab host dot add tab, and then simply pass the tab spec object here. Okay, so it's done now. So now let's just try to reinstall our application and see whether it is working or not. As you can see, my TabHost layout is now running, and now I can simply switch between these 3 tabs. Okay, so this is how we can create this TabHost layout in a second way. Now is we can also do one modification to this TabHost layout. As you can see right here, that as an indicator, this TabHost layout contains the label as an indicator, that is a char value, char sequence. Okay, but instead of the char sequence, we can actually add some images inside this TabHost layout. So how we can do that? Okay, so for that, let's just go to the main activity.java file, and now inside this set indicator area, instead of using the string value, we can actually pass the image value here. Okay, so for that, let's just add some drawables or image files inside our project first. So for that, I will go to new, and let's just add some vector assets to our project. So let's just click on this clip art icon here in order to actually open this menu, and let's just select some icons from right here. Okay, so let's just add this one right here. Okay, so let's just put the name, keep the name as the same, and let's just not alter any of these values here. Let's just click on next and then finish. Okay, so now let's just add some more vector assets here. So I'll say this, and now for the next icon, let's just select this one. Okay, click on next and then finish. Now let's just select one more. So then for the final one, let's just select this one, click on next and then finish. Okay, so now instead of specifying the indicator as a char sequence, what we can do, let's just put this string value as empty, and now as a second argument we can actually pass the drawable icon here. So for that I'll say get resource. I'll use the get resource method. Okay, and then I will say get resource get drawable, and now I can here specify the icon. Okay, so I'll say r dot drawable as it is inside my drawable, and then I will say, you can see actually I can select or I can access to my icons here now. So I can say for the first one it will be account. Okay, let's just hide this. Now instead of the second, I'll say get resource dot get drawable, then r dot drawable dot, and for the second one I will say audio tag. Okay, now let's just remove this string value char sequence value here, and then I will say get resource dot get drawable, then r dot drawable dot, and now for the third one I will say this build black icon. Okay, so now let's just run. You can see, you can also see the icons here that we have used inside our tab host indicator. Now let's just run our application and see whether it is working or not. So my application is running here now. Okay, so we have forgotten, we are actually specifying the icons on the main activity.java file, and we are using the another type host activity is our launcher activity. So let's just change it back to the main activity. Let's just copy cut this from here. Let's just specify that values from to here. So now let's just reinstall our application and see whether it is working or not. Okay, okay, so we actually forgot to edit the configuration, so let's just do that. I'll select the main activity here, then apply. Okay, and now as you can see, instead of labels we have icons as our tab host indicator. Okay, so this is how you can set up a tab host layout in two ways that we saw, and now we have also saw that how we can add the icons instead of the labels. Okay, that are the char sequence value, and how we can use icons there. So this is it for this lecture, and see you in the next video.